What if I told you Ferrari just engineered a suspension system so brilliantly deceptive that racing's governing body literally cannot detect it during inspections? This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now. And it might just rewrite Formula One history forever. Ferrari has just engineered a front suspension architecture that the FIA practically cannot catch during their standard inspection protocols, and this statement carries zero exaggeration. The engineers working out of Maranello have crafted critical suspension elements utilizing a highly specific type of anisotropic carbon fiber, a revolutionary material that behaves in completely contrasting ways depending on precisely what kind of stress gets applied during examination environments. When subjected to the FIA's static load testing procedures, these components appear absolutely rigid, falling perfectly within every single regulatory tolerance threshold imaginable. However, the moment these pieces enter actual racing conditions and experience genuine dynamic loads, they begin flexing in precisely calculated patterns, delivering Ferrari concrete advantages in mechanical grip, camber angle management, and tire compound preservation. This groundbreaking concept sits at the absolute heart of Project 678, Ferrari's championship contender for the 2026 season, representing the team's most ambitious technical gamble in well over a decade. The obvious question becomes, what makes this suspension architecture so extraordinarily special that it justifies sacrificing an entire championship year in 2025? Furthermore, does a legitimate risk exist that the governing body might intervene and prohibit everything before the machine even touches the racing surface? By the conclusion of this deep technical explanation, it becomes crystal clear why Ferrari remains utterly convinced this could become the racing machine that fundamentally transforms the team's recent trajectory. Understanding why Ferrari stacked every single chip on this suspension innovation requires revisiting the absolute sporting catastrophe that defined 2025. Lewis Hamilton arrived at Maranello as a seven-time world champion, the most victorious driver in Formula One's entire recorded history, someone who since his explosive debut season back in 2007 had never endured a complete campaign without tasting victory at least once. Then came 2025 and everything collapsed spectacularly. Not a single podium finish throughout the entire championship running with Ferrari, something that simply had never materialized across nearly 2 full decades of elite racing career. The SF25 absolutely refused to communicate in the same mechanical language as Hamilton's distinctive driving approach. The fundamental problem was deeply embedded within the car's core DNA. Chronic sensitivity to ride height variations forced Ferrari's technical team to operate the machine significantly higher than aerodynamic optimization demanded. Running excessively elevated means hemorrhaging aerodynamic downforce, and reduced downforce directly equals slower lap times across every circuit configuration. Whenever engineers attempted bringing the SF25 closer to what they considered the optimal ride height window, the car transformed into something dangerously unpredictable, and in certain situations, outright illegal, according to technical regulations. Hamilton's disqualification from the Chinese Grand Prix exposed this fundamental flaw in the most publicly humiliating manner conceivable. The wooden plank installed underneath the floor, utilized by the FIA to verify whether teams are operating too low to the racing surface, displayed wear patterns exceeding permitted regulatory limits. 19 consecutive years without facing disqualification terminated because Ferrari couldn't deliver a racing machine capable of operating at the correct ride height without violating technical statutes. The SF25 additionally carried a balance philosophy described as front-end loaded, emphasizing substantial aerodynamic load concentration on the forward axle, naturally favoring drivers capable of aggressively exploiting front-end mechanical grip. Charles Leclerc adapted brilliantly to this particular characteristic. Hamilton absolutely did not. His smooth, fluid driving methodology, the exact approach that carried him to 7 world championships, simply didn't align with what the machine demanded from its pilot. Fred Vasseur observed this nightmare scenario unfolding throughout the opening races, and by late April 2025, made a decision that would fundamentally redefine Ferrari's competitive future, essentially freeze all meaningful development work on the SF25, and redirect complete focus toward the 2026 regulation cycle. Vasseur proved remarkably direct when explaining the strategic rationale behind this dramatic pivot. The team stumbled badly out of the gate with the dual disqualification disaster in China, which cost precious constructor points compared against direct championship rivals. Simultaneously, McLaren dominated with such overwhelming authority across the initial 4 or 5 race weekends that Ferrari leadership recognized early that salvaging 2025 in terms of championship contention would prove nearly impossible. This realization crystallized by the end of April, and from that exact moment the complete organizational pivot toward 2026 began in earnest. By the conclusion of June, wind tunnel development work dedicated to the 2025 car ceased entirely. The internal messaging couldn't have been clearer or more brutally honest. 2025 was being written off as a sacrificial season, and absolutely everything that mattered now centered on Project 678. When deciding to fundamentally transform their entire technical philosophy, Ferrari desperately needed someone who understood exactly where the organization had been repeatedly failing across successive seasons. That individual ultimately became Loic Serra. He spent formative years embedded within Mercedes during the absolute peak of their hybrid-era dominance, understanding intimately how the most successful team operating under those regulations functioned from the inside out. More critically, Serra comprehended something Ferrari had systematically ignored for far too long: the essential art of designing the complete racing machine starting from tire performance requirements, rather than treating rubber compounds as an afterthought problem requiring secondary solutions. His hiring was officially announced during May 2024, and he formally assumed the role of technical director for chassis operations on October 1, 2024. Practically immediately upon Serra's arrival, the fundamental methodology Ferrari employed when conceiving racing machines began shifting dramatically. The pivotal alteration existed within underlying design philosophy. The previous standard operating procedure centered on maximizing aerodynamic downforce generation, extracting every possible kilogram of vertical load from airflow, and only afterward attempting to make tire compounds function within that predetermined aerodynamic reality. Serra completely inverted this technical logic. The suspension architecture became designed primarily to extract optimal performance behavior from tire compounds across varying track conditions, and the aerodynamic package needed to align itself around this mechanical foundation. This might seem like a subtle technical nuance to casual observers, but for Ferrari this philosophical shift represents nothing less than a complete revolution. Chronic problems with tire temperature management, compound degradation, and maintaining the optimal operating window had been tormenting the team relentlessly for years. Race weekends where the car appeared genuinely competitive during Saturday qualifying sessions would completely fall apart during full race distance running. At circuits and environmental conditions where rival organizations excelled, Ferrari frequently crumbled. The root cause almost invariably traced back to identical issues: fundamental inability to maintain tire compounds within the ideal temperature and load range consistently throughout race distances. More than 50 distinct front-wing concepts were simulated and rigorously evaluated by Serra's technical group for the 2026 machine. He additionally spearheaded the decision to return to a suspension arrangement Ferrari hadn't utilized since way back in 2010, and most significantly, he became the creative mind behind the flexible suspension architecture currently attracting such intense scrutiny throughout the paddock. Vasseur left absolutely zero doubt regarding conceptual authorship when discussing the project. When questioned specifically about Project 678, he responded without any diplomatic hedging that this racing machine would represent largely Serra's car, his technical vision made physical. The command structure surrounding the project demands attention for its remarkably compact and restricted nature. Crucial technical intelligence regarding the 678 gets maintained within an extremely tight inner circle. Essentially only Vasseur, Serra, Diego Tondi serving as aerodynamics chief, and Enrico Gualtieri commanding the power unit division possess complete visibility into the final integrated concept. This represents a significant departure from the more distributed and fragmented organizational model Ferrari traditionally employed, clearly demonstrating how convinced leadership remains that they're protecting something genuinely special and potentially championship-winning. The flexible suspension architecture created by Ferrari's engineering team operates on principles that sound deceptively simple conceptually, but prove remarkably intelligent during actual execution. The system's core functionality centers on permitting controlled flexion of the upper wishbone's primary forward link within the front suspension assembly. This structural arm represents one of the principal load-bearing components connecting the complete wheel assembly to the chassis structure. Normally, engineering objectives demand making this element as rigid as physically possible, since any unintended flexion tends to generate unpredictable handling behavior that drivers cannot compensate for. What Ferrari accomplished was discovering a methodology to transform extremely specific flexion patterns into a competitive advantage rather than a liability. The technical foundation underlying this innovation involves utilizing carbon fiber layers possessing anisotropic material properties. In straightforward terms, conventional carbon fiber exhibits extraordinary strength characteristics, but tends to respond similarly regardless of load direction application. The anisotropic variant behaves fundamentally differently. By organizing the composite layers or skins in carefully predetermined orientations, engineers can create components that respond distinctly depending on force vector direction. Apply pressure in one specific direction and deflection remains minimal. Apply equivalent force along a different axis, and flexion appears exactly where computational models predicted. Technical analysis initially published by specialized Italian motorsport media explained that this flexibility gets achieved through intelligent overlapping of these composite layers, aligning fiber orientations so the finished component gains directional properties. The absolutely critical element involves understanding how this interacts with the FIA's inspection methodology. The Federation tests suspension components under static conditions, applying measured force in predetermined directions, and measuring how much the element displaces under load. Provided the deflection remains within specified regulatory limits, the component gets declared legal and approved for competition use. Ferrari's wishbone was engineered specifically to behave like a completely rigid structural bar under these exact testing circumstances, appearing perfectly compliant with regulations in the precise directions where the FIA conducts load examinations. On track during actual racing conditions, the scenario transforms completely. Under competition loads, the wishbone experiences complex combinations of vertical, longitudinal, and lateral forces that don't correspond directly to the isolated vectors utilized during static bench testing. Under these genuine dynamic racing loads, the arm begins flexing in controlled patterns exactly as designed. When this calculated flexion occurs, the effective length of the structural element reduces precisely, and this produces carefully calibrated variation in camber angle. Camber angle defines how the tire contact patch meets the racing surface. Getting this angle correct proves absolutely crucial for extracting maximum mechanical grip. Excessive or insufficient camber means wasting potential adhesion that could translate into lap time. Ferrari's system permits a form of dynamic camber adjustment without incorporating any active components whatsoever. No hydraulic valves, no electronic actuators, nothing prohibited by technical regulations. The suspension responds in purely passive fashion to the forces the racing machine experiences naturally. Different velocity ranges, distinct tire compounds, and varying phases throughout each lap like braking zones, mid-corner rotation, and acceleration phases produce optimized camber responses without any electronic intervention required. An official FIA spokesperson confirmed during December 2025 that current testing procedures continue being based exclusively on static conditions at ambient temperature. As long as this methodology remains unchanged, Maranello's concept stays theoretically completely within regulatory boundaries. This ambitious suspension gamble doesn't exist in isolation from broader competitive context. It integrates into a highly particular scenario, the comprehensive regulatory revolution arriving for 2026. The new technical rules will shorten and narrow the cars considerably, while simultaneously reducing minimum weight requirements to 768 kilograms, representing a decrease of approximately 30 kilograms compared to current specifications. In a racing discipline where every single gram gets debated endlessly, this reduction is genuinely massive. The aerodynamic philosophy undergoes complete redesign as well. The current ground effect floor featuring complex Venturi tunnels will give way to flatter underbody surfaces with elongated diffuser sections, and total downforce generation should drop somewhere between 15 and 20% compared to 2025 machines. Replacing the drag reduction system comes an active aerodynamics architecture with front and rear wing elements, varying drag coefficients and downforce levels in real time during competition. Tire specifications change dramatically too. Front compounds will shrink approximately 25 mm in width, and rear compounds roughly 30 mm narrower, fundamentally altering how lateral and longitudinal forces get distributed and how the chassis loads each corner. The power unit receives complete reimagining with the split between internal combustion engine output and electrical component delivery moving toward a balanced 50-50 ratio. The motor generator unit responsible for harvesting kinetic energy during braking phases will deliver 350 kilowatts, approximately triple the current specification output. All these regulatory changes carry direct implications for Ferrari's suspension concept. Reduced downforce generation means diminished extreme structural loading on suspension components during high-speed cornering, facilitating easier control of programmed flexion patterns. Elimination of such intense ground effect reduces the chronic ride height sensitivity that absolutely tortured the SF25 throughout its competitive life. It was precisely this sensitivity that led directly to Hamilton's disqualification and forced the team operating the entire season with the car elevated higher than aerodynamic optimization desired. The 2026 regulations create almost accidentally the perfect environmental conditions for Maranello's innovation to flourish. Moderately reduced aerodynamic loads, decreased paranoia regarding optimal ride height windows, and expanded room to explore passive camber variations without pushing the machine into chaotic handling zones. Ferrari isn't merely creating a clever suspension system in isolation. They're engineering a suspension architecture tailor-made for how racing will unfold under 2026's completely different technical landscape. One of the most fascinating aspects surrounding Project 678 involves resurrecting a technical solution that forms part of the team's own competitive history. Ferrari is returning to utilizing pushrod suspension geometry both front and rear, something that hasn't occurred since the F10 machine from 2010. For those not following these technical details closely, the distinction between pushrod and pull rod configurations lies in how forces from the wheel assembly get transferred to springs and dampers, and where these elements get packaged within the chassis structure. Pushrod systems push connecting rods toward the spring damper assembly, while pull rod configurations pull the system under load. Neither approach is automatically superior in absolute terms. Each brings compromises regarding center of gravity placement, component packaging efficiency, maintenance accessibility, and load distribution characteristics. What matters is how effectively the layout communicates with the aerodynamic and structural concept of the complete machine. The F10 from 2010 stands as an emblematic reference point in recent Ferrari history. Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa nearly carried that machine to the championship title, with Alonso losing the Drivers' Championship to Sebastian Vettel during the final race in Abu Dhabi by merely 4 points. It remains an open wound in Ferrari's recent competitive memory. The return to double pushrod geometry isn't driven by sentimentalism or nostalgia. The arrangement permits a narrower front-end profile and more tapered nose structure, improving airflow that travels the length of the car toward the rear and energizes the diffuser section. Everything about this configuration works harmoniously with the new aerodynamic package requirements. Ferrari is additionally repositioning the steering arm behind the lower wishbone, a solution directly inspired by what McLaren implemented successfully in recent seasons. This seemingly small detail demonstrates that Maranello isn't close to learning from what rival organizations execute well. All this technical development is occurring with Hamilton participating in uncommonly direct fashion throughout the design process. He made explicitly clear during media interviews that he convened a series of meetings with senior leadership, including John Elkann, Benedetto Vigna, and Fred Vasseur. He sat down extensively with Loic Serra, discussed the power unit for the upcoming season, front and rear suspension philosophies, and made certain to catalog specific problems he experiences with the current machine. Typically, drivers describe subjective sensations and allow engineers to translate feedback into numerical targets. Here, Hamilton is involving himself directly in fundamental design philosophy decisions. His message to the organization proved forceful and unambiguous. He challenged everyone within Ferrari, especially those occupying the top hierarchical positions. He reminded leadership that across the last 20 years, drivers including Alonso, Raikkonen, and Vettel passed through Maranello, all world champions, and none managed bringing the championship trophy back after 2007. Hamilton declared emphatically that he refuses becoming the next legendary name departing Ferrari without the title. The frustration accumulated throughout 2025, a complete season without podium finishes, fuels this exceptional level of personal engagement. The characteristics defining the SF25, featuring nervous rear-end behavior and handling that punishes smooth driving styles, sit at the origin of this fundamental change. The suspension architecture Serra is designing was conceived substantially to deliver Hamilton a racing machine that finally communicates properly with his driving methodology. Predictable, communicative, capable of preserving tire life and maintaining balance across full race distances. A suspension system that better controls tire temperatures and guarantees more stable behavior tends to resurrect exactly those qualities that made Hamilton nearly unbeatable during his absolute peak years. Ferrari is gambling everything on this radical approach. If they're correct, Project 678 could finally deliver the car Hamilton and the faithful have awaited for years. If they're wrong, the risk is having wasted time, resources, and the patience of one of the greatest drivers in history. What's certain right now is that the 2026 suspension isn't merely an engineering component, but a declaration that Ferrari prefers risking everything at the absolute limit of technical legality, rather than remaining trapped in the same mistakes that have kept them from titles since 2007. If this deep dive into Ferrari's revolutionary engineering gamble opened your eyes to just how insane modern Formula One technology has become, do me a huge favor right now. Smash that subscribe button so you never miss when we break down the next technical innovation that could change racing forever. Drop a like on this video if you think Ferrari's all-in bet is either genius or complete madness, and tell me in the comments whether you believe Project 678 will finally end the championship drought or become another painful chapter in Maranello's recent history. Share this with every racing fan you know who needs to understand what's really happening behind the scenes. The 2026 season is going to be absolutely wild, and you definitely want to be here when it all goes down.